welcome everyone. It's good to see some faces popping up on the screen. People have joined us, and believe it or not, we have about 100 people who are registered, which is quite exciting. I'll start by introducing myself. First of all, good morning. And first of all, let me just start by welcoming all of you to our inaugural KEDU webinar. This is a very fast one. We're elated to be able to gather all these incredible Kenyan doctors and medicine trainees at a very unprecedented time in our world, across specialties, at different levels of training, cross-continentally. I feel like this in itself is a huge deal that we are able to gather in this way. So thank you for carving out the time to be here and prioritizing us as a valid reason to share your time with us. So thank you so much. I also want to mention that I think for a long time there's been Kenyan doctors across the diaspora, in Kenya also, for decades, and a forum that allows conversation and collaboration, mentorship and camaraderie is truly something that we all have at some point sat and thought, man, I wish there was something that existed that that would allow me to connect with people, get some mentorship on something if I'm trying to maybe get through my steps or something, or find more information on how to practice in the US, or the other way around, if someone is looking for opportunities, collaboration with the clinicians and healthcare providers on the ground. I think there's always, for me at least personally, I can say there's always been this, okay, where do I go to find that information? And I really feel that KEDU has stepped into that gap. And this is our opportunity to introduce ourselves and for everyone to get to know who we are and what we hope to provide, what gaps we hope to fill. So again, I also want to just shout out to MSAKE, which is Medical Students Association of Kenya, and KMA, Kenya Medical Association, two of our partnering organizations who I think we have a huge representation of the physicians and trainees that are connected to these organizations. So I want to shout out to you guys and welcome you guys as well. So a few housekeeping rules as we begin. First of all, we want to know who you are. We're going to introduce ourselves, but even more importantly, we want to know who you are. So we've created a website discussion forum, and this will allow you guys to do introductions, and it will also encourage conversations thereafter, after this webinar is done, because we really want to get to know your areas of interest, your specialties, and really what you want to get out of KEDU. This call will be recorded because, again, being a physician is quite a busy job, so not everyone is able to make it on the live call. So it'll be available so that people can join in and listen and continue to contribute on the discussion board. And again, that's why we wanted the discussion board to promote conversation beyond this call. Additionally, everyone's on mute, and we'll keep everyone on mute and off video until the later part of the meeting, where you'll be able to ask questions or put your questions onto the chat, and that way we can ask them and pose them for you to the team. And I think that will just help us all be take an organized approach to this call. So thank you again for being here. So let me begin first by introducing our fearless founder, Dr. Christine Garuya, who's really the person who had the vision for this organization and took the initiative to gather us here today. So Dr. Christine Garuya is the assistant professor in the emergency medicine department at Yale University. I'll have her talk to us and introduce herself so we can get to know her a bit better. Welcome, Christine.
Thank you so much. Thanks so much, Dr. Yakel. And thanks all for joining. Really excited to see so many familiar names from all walks of life and many new friends. And good morning to some of our friends on the West Coast. Good afternoon to those of us on the East Coast, and good evening to our friends and colleagues back home. So just like Nakeo said, I am an assistant professor at the Yale School of Medicine in emergency medicine, which is like casualty. I'm a consultant there. I've been there for almost 7 years now. And during this time, I've really been working on chronic non-communicable diseases, which is my main area of interest. I'm really passionate about health outcomes for things like cancer and diabetes, hypertension, and so on. And so to that end, I've been back and forth, as you'll hear, same story from many of our founders, back and forth, just one sec, just want to make sure everyone's muted. So back and forth to Kenya, 4 or 5 times a year, working on various projects, for example, with the Ministry of Health, on the national NCD study with WHO, looking at NCDs there. I've worked with many organizations like APHRC, the African Population Health Research Center, Kemry Wellcome Trust, Kenya Mental Health Foundation, ENKF, with Dr. Ben Washira, who's a very close friend and colleague, and many others. But just over this time, I realized that this was noble but not sustainable, and that there needed to be some kind of a framework that would enable people like me that were Kenyans who were based in the US for whatever reason, that wanted to do their research or education or clinical work back home. And so to that end, along were these 5 heroes, I call them, or friends, that were just like me, coming back and forth, doing amazing things back home, working with amazing collaborators, and meeting these amazing people we wanted to keep in touch with in turn. And so thus KEDU was born. And, we've had some really amazing talks with Msake and KMA, and we continue to look forward to meeting with other organizations and using this platform as a way to both increase visibility on what's going on in the US for our Kenyan colleagues, but also to figure out what's going on back home. So we're keeping up to date as well, and we're contributing where there's a gap and where we can do so. And so we'll talk about that a little bit more. So we've created a webinar, a forum just for the webinar, where you can actually go and click on the website and introduce yourself, maybe by name, where you work, and what you do, your specialty area. And so the way to do that, and then I'll go through the rest of the website, is if you click on our website, if you're at home, if you're on the computer or on your phone, and you go to login or register, you only need a username that you create in an email, and then I think it sends a confirmation to your email and you're in. And then that way we can use this area both for introducing ourselves today, but also to continue discussions either through this webinar or otherwise in the future. So I encourage all of you, if you can, to get on there. We'll be monitoring that throughout this talk. All right, so just a little background again on KEDU. So this is our website. Just the initial launching page. I'm going to take a moment to walk through some of our programs so far. So if you go to our activities and discussion forums, one area that we really want to build up is the use of articles for key topics of interest. So for example, here we have a couple of articles so far. For those that are on the phone, the articles are about key topics. For example, an overview that I wrote for a different outlet about the gap between the diaspora and back home. And then from one of our other founders on the first 6 months of residency training, which are harrowing for many of us in the US. So we're looking for writers, people that are interested in topics on, wellness, on the first few months of internship back home, and so on and so forth. So we hope that will be a resource that people can go back to within our community, and even reach out to those authors in the future. Another platform that we're really hoping to leverage are the discussion forums. And so, as we said, we've created a specific discussion forum just for the webinars themselves, but we also hope to include all of the other webinar discussion forums for people to use. The first being for Kenyan physicians in the US. And that's, for people with questions in the US that, for example, on, again, picking residencies, et cetera. And then for other discussion areas, we also have, for people who want to get involved in projects back home. And then we also have for people that are looking to start training or have just started training in the US. So we encourage people to go there and interact with their colleagues and friends. And then lastly, some other activities that we have just sort of launched are to do with KMA and MSAKE. So we have a US-based mentorship initiative that we're going to start, which is going to be, again, just for people that are already in the US wanting to speak to people that are ahead of them in training and getting to advance their careers here. We want to have a mentorship initiative specifically between KMA, MSAKE, and ourselves that is all comers, that will have both a monthly component but also an individual component to it, and more on that to come. We're already signed on to support the MSAKE Repub project, which some of you know is a publication journal for MSAKE that will need some editors and reviewers and mentors to help with publishing of those projects. And then we also have the MSAKE Tubonge project, which is a really amazing wellness project that they've started that, again, we're working with them to help develop the curriculum and so on. So those are some of the initial activities. I'm gonna add on, I'm going to turn back over to Yvonne to get us to introduce all of the other amazing founders, and I'll go to the founders page for that and let them cycle through. But those are some of our initial activities and programs. We're welcoming ideas from and input from all those in the US, but also welcoming a lot of input and contributions from those at home as well. Thank you so much. Thank you, Yvonne. I'll turn over to you for the intros. Okay, I think Yvonne is stuck somewhere. Why don't we go ahead? So Dr. Wanjiku, why don't you go ahead? Grace, please.
Hi, everybody. Hi, Christine. It's a pleasure to be here with you today. I am just very honored to be part of this project. I am an emergency medicine practitioner as well. Currently based at Brown University. I do know Christine because I spent some time at Yale, but now I moved over to Brown University. But outside of that, I have been just very involved in trying to come back home as much as I can. That started during my residency or during my master's training where I was involved in trauma training for medical students at Moy Teaching and Referral. So I got involved with that for a little bit. And also I have been part of point of care ultrasound teaching. So my particular interest in being back in Kenya has to do with a lot of teaching, training, and capacity development, or just capacity building. So I've been involved in trauma training. My particular area of interest is in point of care ultrasound teaching. And so I don't know if I've met any of you, but I've been involved at Aga Khan, at Nairobi Hospital, and more recently at KNH. So I am looking just for continued collaboration, continued work, and also just getting an idea, because sometimes when we're here, we might have an idea of what is needed at home, but we want to hear, back from people, what is necessary to kind of try and see how we can share resources, how we can build capacity and kind of improve our practice wherever we may be. So happy to be here, and I look forward to more.
Thank you so much, Grace. Good friend and close colleague. Steve, do you want to go next?
Thanks, Christine. So my name is Steve. I'm currently a hematology oncology fellow here in North Carolina. My background started in Kenya, where I did my medical school at the University of Nairobi, and then sort of moved to the US to get additional training in global health sciences. And currently, after my residency in internal medicine, I'm in my second year of fellowship. So you know, my connection to Kenya is pretty longitudinal since my medical training there, and I've tried to go back as often as I can. I do sort of work in several global health countries. So I've done work in Kenya, Malawi, South Africa, Tanzania, and in the US. And I think one of the things I'm excited about in this platform is to provide mentorship, especially to young trainees from Kenya who might be wanting to explore non-traditional pathways, beyond just a MED or becoming an MO. So, there's such things we can talk about. The second thing is building local capacity for research, specifically patient-oriented research that then advances our clinical care. And this is this is what I spend most of my time currently doing global health research. And the last part is basically education and training. I do think that there's a lot of good training opportunities in Kenya, especially through the various medical schools and through the various fellowships and residencies. And I think trying to find opportunities to expose people to those opportunities within Kenya as well as outside of Kenya, that would be a good initiative.
Yeah. Perfect. Thanks so much, Steve. And then Mayoka, Dr. Maina.
Hi, everyone. My name is Mayoka. I am currently a surgery resident at Yale New Haven. My interest is basically in academic surgery. I have previously done research in 3D printing of organs for transplant. I'm currently focusing on surgical oncology, so I'm working on a bunch of projects on basically outcomes and patient survival. And I think my interest in KEDU it's very personal, because for the longest time I was interested in global surgery, and I just never saw someone who was doing exactly what I wanted to do. So especially when I was a med student at Yale, there were a lot of people who had all these mission trips where they'd go to some random, third world country, be on safari for half of the time and call that global surgery. And that to me did not sound like a sustainable model. It did not sound like anything that I was interested in. So I actually remember I bumped into Christine when I was a med student. She saw my name tag, so that I was Kenyan, and we've been friends ever since. And I think when we came up with the idea of the project, I felt like this is exactly what I was looking for when I was a med student and did not have that. And so I'm looking forward to collaborating with our colleagues back home. I'm excited to exchange ideas. Like I mentioned, I am interested in academic surgery, so I am particularly looking forward to helping with the REPUB project, with writing papers, with research, and just in capacity building and learning from you guys.
Fantastic. One of the people at the front lines of the COVID outbreak here, unfortunately. Thanks for joining me, Oka. One person that could not join us today, but that I want to do justice to, is Dr. Chimtai Mungo, because she's currently performing a C-section on somebody. And Chimtai is an OB-GYN, obstetric gynecologist, who's a clinical researcher, born and raised in Kitale. She received a bachelor's degree with honors from the University of California in Berkeley, and she completed medical school at the University of California in San Francisco. She's following a residency in OB-GYN there as a global health fellow at UCSF. And she's currently working on cervical cancer prevention among HIV positive women in Western Kenya, doing some really awesome projects in Western right now. She's passionate about using clinical research, advocacy, and capacity building to pursue equity in women's global health for women. And her work is supported by the National Institute of Health. So we're saddened she couldn't come, but she's been extremely involved, and you look forward to meeting her again in future. And of course, last but not least, our lovely MC, Dr. Kamal Yvonne.
Hi, everybody. My name is Dr. Yvonne Yakio Kamal, and I am a newly minted family medicine resident as of July 1, and I'll be practicing in Jacksonville, Florida, or training in Jacksonville, Florida. Currently, I am at the University of Kansas School of Medicine, which is where I completed a BA in microbiology initially, moved on to another BA in international studies, and more recently, I completed a joint MD MBA degree. So my interests revolve around moving beyond the bedside, I would say. So health economics, health technology solutions in the developing world. I spent the last 4 years working on research as part of a team with a nonprofit called Global Health Innovations Kenya on health tech solutions in Siaya, Kilifi, and Mombasa counties, creating solutions for HIV positive women who are pregnant. And I've really, really enjoyed that work. So my other interests beyond economics and HIV and AIDS work and include extensive mixed methods research and implementation research. And I'm also really passionate about mental health advocacy. So Tubonge, the project that MSAKE has taken on to provide mental health support for medicine trainees, is something that I really love and I look forward to actively supporting. Why KEDU? Because I really want to collaborate. I want to learn firsthand from clinicians on the ground in Kenya who are directly interfacing with patients daily. And I really do want to be a part of a community that I can pour into and also learn from at the same time. And I also definitely, just like Muyoka, want to go back home and just do more work back home, because I think someone told me one time charity begins at home. So it's hard to make a difference other places if you haven't started in your own homestead. So I'm grateful and happy to be here.
Fantastic. So, and it looks like Chemtai may be able to join us at the last minute. So thanks, Iwan. I'm going to turn it back over to you shortly. Mm-hmm. We wanted to make sure, again, we took a decent amount of time just to introduce ourselves, so you knew some of the faces behind the work, but we definitely want to hear from everybody. So now we're going to move into a different section of the meeting where we hear from you guys. We will definitely take questions, comments, thoughts, feedback. I will just take a second to address the elephant in the room, which is COVID-19, which is, on all of our minds. And many of you are working extremely hard to address this yourselves in clinical and administrative positions. We will dedicate a webinar to this shortly. And so I just wanted to kind of make sure that people are aware of that. We are aware of that, and we want to be responsive to in any way that we can in our community to help and collaborate back home. So, yeah. So, okay, so I'll turn back over to you, Dr. Kamal, to lead the questions section.
Okay. Thank you to everyone who's introduced themselves. I just wanted to let everybody know that there was 145 people, doctors across the diaspora, who registered to be on the call today, which just to literally, that's huge. It's quite huge. And what I see this space becoming more and more is a place that allows us to find new avenues for collaboration, find ready mentors for each other, and just a place where we can collaborate, partner, and support each other. Because I think we're all doing the same thing, regardless of where we are. We're taking care of patients. So again, the first thing I wanted to first also remind everyone, please put in any questions you have in the chat. Then that way we can pose them to the team, any questions that you may have. To get us started, I wanted to, I think one of the things that Christine just addressed is talking about COVID-19, and I know there's probably a lot of questions about that. So we're actually lining up several speakers and clinicians that will tackle that on the next webinar, which will be in about 30 days from today. So if you have those questions, I also encourage you to still post them, but we'll also have a separate area on the discussion forum where you can post those questions that we will ask. during that webinar. So for now, I think one of the things that most people ask Wanda is, why has it taken so long for there to be spaces like this for physicians in diaspora, Kenyan physicians in diaspora, and Kenyan physicians on the continent or in Kenya to collaborate? And I was wondering if any one of the, maybe Christine, you can start us off, just reflections on why it's taken a long time for something like this to happen.
Yeah, I think it's a good question, and that's actually a lot of what the first article I wrote about was on our page, which I published in Africa Science News a couple years ago. And I think it's multifactorial, but I just think it's challenging because there's not an infrastructure that makes it easy or feasible for those in the diaspora to link back home. So I will say, in my own experience, I've probably spent personally thousands of dollars to be able to do the work that I felt was important, whether it's mentorship, whether it's certain projects and so on over the years. And I really had to basically cold call, cold email people, and the ones that wanted to collaborate, we've done some good work, and that's really where things have grown from. But and I think the founders would reflect similar stories, but I think a lot of people either don't have the capacity, maybe the grit, whatever you want to call it, to continue in that way. And again, as I said at the beginning, I don't think that's sustainable. There are some initiatives, actually, which one of our founders is privy to, which is the Carnegie Diaspora Fellowship, which was just launched like 2 years ago for those that are in the US that don't know about that. Which provides some funding for US-based Kenyan citizens to go do academic work back home. But things like that have really just not been available. Is there an interest? Absolutely. We posted this on our social media, and it was trending right away. When like to your point, this chat discussion was very popular. So there's definitely been a need. I think we needed the infrastructure, and well, I guess hopefully it's here. I think I'd love to hear from the others too, but those are my thoughts.
I'm curious about whether any of the other co-founders wanted to chime in on that question, on why has it taken so long to have spaces where physicians both in the US, Kenyan physicians in the US and Kenyan physicians in Kenya can have conversations and create collaborations. Maybe it's already happening, and maybe it's happening on a case-by-case basis, person to person, if we meet somewhere at a conference. But why do you think it's taken so long?
I agree with a lot of the points that Christine has raised. I think more than anything, it is very resource intensive. So you have to, especially because there are no preformed platforms that exist, you have to go out of your way and spend your money and really invest a lot of your time. And like you said, physicians, we're busy people. So it does, not everyone, and I think very few of us, especially when we're in training, have the time to just be able to spend, X amount of months or weeks in Kenya. And I think that's a huge part of it, coupled with, it's expensive. I also feel that, like you did mention, I think that we are few and far in between. So a lot of the connections are personal connections. And because there isn't a huge body or a huge, annual conference that unites everyone, you kind of have to go out of your way to seek these people. And, if you, like I said, I was lucky I bumped into Christine, who was already doing global surgery work. Sometimes you might bump into someone who's, not particularly interested or invested in the type of things that you are interested in. And I feel, which is completely fine, I feel having a platform like this will hopefully be able to match people with, with other doctors, practitioners, whatever, who are interested in the same things that they are interested in too.
Thank you very much, Mioka, for that insight. And I think also, I think this could be a good segue to my next question. So I think there's a difference between these physicians who have trained in the US throughout the course of their training, and I think that might be some of us. But then there's also physicians who are on the board who have trained in Kenya, so they can relate to the needs that Kenyan physicians who have trained in Kenya have when they think of diaspora physicians. I'm curious, for those who trained in Kenya and then made that connection to the States, what was that experience like for you, and what are some things that you felt like you could have benefited from being on the Kenya side prior to making that connection to the US side?
Well, I guess that mainly refers to me. Yeah, so I think, I'm going to respond in twofold. First is that to your previous question about why it's taken this long, I think there's been collaborations at a small scale. And my experience is a good example of that, because when I first came to the US as a medical student, I met Kenyan physicians who were trained at the University of Nairobi, who were doing residencies at that time in the United States, and that was a breath of fresh air, because people were able to tell me about the USMLEs and like what it is like to get into residency, and how to make yourself competitive. Things that, as a medical student in Kenya, you get an A, you get admitted to University of Nairobi, you do 5 or 6 years, you go become an intern, then you become an MO, and then maybe you go do MEd, or maybe you locum. I mean, it's a linear process, and throughout that process, there's no time where I had to write a personal statement, or where I had to have a career objective. So I think the collaborations were there. They were small scale, and I think KEDU is probably best placed to harmonize that and be like a reference point. In terms of the second question, which is training in Kenya and then coming to the US, what were some of the challenges? I think the challenges are mostly informational. So knowing what's the right thing to do, when to do it, and then resources, having the time and the money and the human resources, so people who can hold your hand, who can show you the way, and help connect you to opportunities that are available. That you might be ambitious, but you might not know exactly that a certain medicine program has taken Kenyans for residency, 5 years 5 years straight, and that should be a place that you look at. So there are challenges, but I think they are not insurmountable. And having this platform of people who are primarily based in the US, but also people who are based in Kenya, regularly talking, is probably going to address most of the obstacles that I encountered about 10 years ago when I was starting this process.
Thank you so much, Steve. I think you pointed out some really great insights in the fact that there's someone who can go through their entire career, and in Kenya, it's a different trajectory than here, and what's required of you at every one of those stages is different. And I think what you said, that you never, at any one point, never asked to write a personal statement, which I think is great insight, because I think on the US side, you're constantly writing personal statements, even just to even be considered for undergraduate degree right after high school. So you get that like training. But then I think also one thing I'd like to also point out, I think there's been a resounding, everyone keeps saying that they want to come back. Those who are here, like, we want to make the connections back home. I know you work on a global health scale, like on multiple countries across Africa. I guess since we're still on you, maybe you can give us an idea of how did you make those connections in terms of now going back the other way, because we have physicians both who are in the diaspora trying to go back, and physicians who are on the continent trying to make the connections to the diaspora.
So since Chemtai has joined us, and I know she and I have talked about this, I'll probably have her give her perspective first and get a chance to introduce herself or wave.
Hi, everybody. This is Dr. Chemtai. Sorry, I am in service. But yeah, really nice to be here, and thank you all for participating. So as far as being a diaspora and Kenyan physician and wanting to collaborate at home, there's a lot of opportunities. I think, there's either the academic route, if you're working in an academic center, increasingly more academic programs are doing global health work. I say that in quotes because in Kenya, it's just health, but in America, it's global health. But certainly, if you, wherever you live, academic centers near you probably are doing some work in different African countries, and Kenya is a very sort of welcoming country. So a lot of programs have collaborations there, and they could really use local knowledge and insights that you, being a physician born in Kenya, participating or practicing medicine in the US, you bring insights that folks who, it's just very different for a foreigner to be able to bring such insights. So, introducing yourself to folks, availing yourself, even through the nonprofit sectors. There's a lot of nonprofits that are doing different elements of health, public health, etc. And, you can offer your services via consultancy, help guide projects, and, the more, depending on how much time you have to be able to be back home, I'd say just look around what's around. So, for example, I work through my university, which UCSF has had a 30-year collaboration with Kisumu and Kemery. So it's very easy for me to be able to go back and kind of establish projects. The infrastructure was there. And there's a lot of, such universities or nonprofits that have been working in different places that would very much welcome your insights as a physician who has roots in Kenya.
Thank you so much, Chimtai. Thank you so much. I think that gives an idea of what that might look like for someone who is making those connections between Kenya and the diaspora, specifically the US diaspora. There's a question that just came out from the chat, and the question is if we could share about how we can be reached for mentorship and advice, since that is one of the things that we've discussed as being able to create an environment for. I wonder if Christine, you can take that one on.
Sure, and yeah, absolutely. So a couple of things. I think Sheila, I can't tell if she's US based or Kenya based. So two things. So as I mentioned, for the US side, people that are in pre-med, medical school, residency, and needing just that extra step, what paper should I be reading, what book should I be studying, that kind of thing. We actually have a new director who we've sort of taken on, who will be at one of our future meetings to introduce himself, and we will have a unique US-based mentorship program. For those that, okay, Sheila just said US-based, so that's your answer, Sheila. I want to answer the Kenya question just briefly, and then I think there's another question someone else can take, I see, from Kenya, which is, and to your point, Sheila, we will create some kind of a template that will allow mentees to sign up and desiring mentors to set up. In the meantime, you can also just email us specifically on our website. Just hit the contact and we'll make sure we keep you in the loop on that. For the Kenya side, there'll be something similar coming up, and either Steve or Chemtai can speak to that.
Yeah, so we recently had a discussion with MSAC, and I think, as I mentioned in my introduction, one of, I think some of the best opportunities to do the right type of mentorship starts with the young trainees in med school and soon after med school. And I mean, at all stages, we all need mentorship, but I feel like when you're more flexible when you're younger in your training. So we are currently developing a structured mentorship platform for Kenyan-based physicians and medical students to partner with other Kenyan-based physicians and medical students, as well as people in the diaspora. So we will be disseminating this through the website, and we'll look for feedback on, we want to formalize the process by having sort of like a mentorship. Some people call it an individual development plan, or a mentorship contract, or a mentorship agreement. But basically, it's the way we've envisioned it is the mentee identifying let's say 3 things that they want to get out of a mentorship relationship, and they offer 3 things that they'll seek to deliver. And then based on how that matches up with the mentor, whether in the US or in Kenya, they'll get paired up, and there will be frequent, maybe quarterly to every 6 months check-in for long-term projects, or monthly for short-term projects. And if the mentorship relationship at any point doesn't work out for either the mentee or the mentor, then that can be reevaluated through the KEDU platform. So we're not forcing people onto a structure, but basically creating a structure from which people can form relationships that end up working for their career development or professional development. And most of the time when we talk about mentorship here, we refer to professional development, but there are other types of mentorship, including just how to be a better person, how to have empathy, especially in this day and age where medical training can feel a little bit mechanical. So one way to do that would be to have several mentors, but that's something that we can probably build up on based on experiences that come along.
Thank you very much, Steve, for that wonderful response. I don't know if there's anybody else who wanted to chime in. Chimtai?
Yeah, I think one thing would be good as KEDU grows and a collaboration with medical schools in particular grow through Msaki and others is to support mentorship around, academic writing, critical thinking among med students early, because those are things that, I think the Kenyan system doesn't support as well. And those are elements that, when you finish your MEd and you're trying to make that transition, there are skills that take a while to sort of build upon. And even, we know that Kenya, there's a crisis in Kenya where a lot of physicians are not employed because of kind of economics of the health systems. So yeah, starting early to give people options around if you want to do post your master's outside, as a first year in med school, these are things you should be thinking about. And the idea is not to support kind of an exodus of doctors, but to also give people options. So, eventually of course, folks can come back, but, starting early is very, very important. It's really hard to do, so for example, when when you train in the States, when you start undergraduate, 4 years, at the beginning of your undergraduate, you're planning for med school. What classes am I taking? What skills do I need to pick up? So similarly, starting really early and so eventually having some sort of like mentorship or clubs, just resources can be shared. So students can start in their first year of med school to prepare themselves to be competitive for residencies all over the world. Because it's something that's very hard to do within a year or two. It really takes, 4 to 6 years. So I'm hoping those are things we can work on together with the leadership of the different med schools in Kenya.
Thank you so much, Chimtai. And I think that actually helps us move into the next question. There's 2 questions that have come up. One from, I think Steve has answered this one, but the question was, first, is membership limited only to MDs? And then the other follow-up question was, when you say physicians, do you mean, does that include surgeons as well? And I'll have Christine take this question.
Yeah, I was giggling because, yeah, Steve answered it appropriately. We're using physicians in a very US-based way. So yeah, physicians for us means all like doctors, people that have been to medical school. Yeah, all of the above. We have 2 surgeons in the founding membership, both Dr. Chimtai, who's all surgeoned up, OB-GYN, and then, and then Dr. Miyoko Maina, who's general surgery and training, but will specialize. So absolutely surgeons. We've had a lot of really great questions, both when we announced KEDU in November and leading up to this, about the involvement of non-physicians, meaning like clinical officers, what we call in the US advanced practice providers, APPs, and we realize they're a huge contribution to the medical system, and that they can't be ignored, and that we need to collaborate to affect outcomes in Kenya, period, and that's just it. We're still thinking strategically about how to do that in a way that doesn't overwhelm and yet is effective in its mission. So what I would say for those cadders, nurses, clinical officers, et cetera, please just watch this space. We will definitely have many initiatives that we'll need, to be collaborative in, but for right now, we're primarily focusing on physicians and physicians in training. And when I say physicians in training, I mean in the US, that's a pre-medicine student, that's a medical student, that's a resident. In Kenya, those are medical students, and then obviously junior doctors, et cetera. So if that, I think there's a question on that as well. Thanks, Nikhil.
Thank you very much, Christine. Now there's one question here that I really think requires its own webinar, if not two webinars, which is USMLEs, because every person's experience is different, maybe different. I think some of the questions that are coming up on the chat are, how soon should you take it? If you want to, how soon in your training should you take it? What's the ideal time to take it? Not take it, but take them, because there's step 1, step 2, and step 3. So I think I'd like to maybe, if you guys don't mind, I know the first person that asked this question was Marwa, so thank you so much for that question. And I think you really posed that question really well, and I'd like to kind of read it to you guys. So his question is, my question is on taking the unconventional pathway and attempting to apply for residency in the US after medical school in Kenya. Considering taking the USMLE steps is such a grueling process, would you advise going for it, especially if the end goal is to come back and work from home? I think that in itself is a very large question. I think that many of us are constantly grappling with that. If you haven't taken the steps yet, and you're on the Kenya side, and also if you are on the US side, you're like, okay, I've done all this, now I'm gonna go back and practice in Kenya. What does that mean? So I think, I don't know, Christine, I'm gonna pitch this to you and ask you what you think about maybe having an entire webinar specifically answering these questions.
Yeah, we're definitely interested in that. I think Miyoka, I will have Miyoka contribute as well, and Steve. Okay. Absolutely, webinar, yes.
Yes. So go ahead, Steve and Miyoka, help us understand your experiences and shed some light on this question.
So I can speak to it from taking it very recently. I think I'm the youngest graduate in the group. And like it has been mentioned in the chat, it is a very grueling process. You need to prepare for it. It's a very tough exam. And I know, because I grew up in Kenya, I went to school, I know we pride ourselves, you've taken KCSE and all that. It is, I think, the hardest exam I have ever taken. I do feel that what would be useful in the interim before we had the webinar is maybe we can start a chat on the website, and I'm happy to start giving off my tips, what's considered. It just like step 1 now, just move to pass fail, so there are all these new changes, and kind of just giving a brief intro of what is USMLE, what do you need to study, how long do you need to study. And then we can have a discussion forum there in the interim before the webinar, just because I feel like Christine and Yvonne have said that that's a question that can be answered, not in 5 minutes. So I'm very happy to do that, and I'll just start a chat on the webinar, on the website.
Thank you so much, Miyoka. Do you want to chime in, Steve?
Yeah, yeah, this is a common question. I think a few folks on this platform, some of those joining from the US and some joining from Kenya, we've talked about it either through social media or through direct text or emails. The question did summarize basically everyone's feeling about USMLE when you're starting out, especially if you're starting out from Kenya. That, it's a long, gruesome process, but it's, if you ask me, it's so I think it's not insurmountable. It's totally possible. A ton of people have done it, and there are enough success stories to make it worth your while. In terms of whether it's it's worth it if the plan is to go back home, then that comes down to a personal philosophy and a personal choice. Do you want to, my attitude going into this was, I knew I wanted to do global health. I knew I wanted to work back in Kenya or other places in developing countries, but I also knew I wanted to get the best possible training I could get when I was doing my training, that then allows me this flexibility to choose and pick where I work. So, and that was one of my incentives to do my training in the US, because I knew if training in the US, I could go back and work in Kenya, but the reverse is not that easy. So we definitely must have a webinar, and we can bring people who've done this process. And I think to Muyoka's point, there will be some differences between a US-based medical trainee doing a USMLE test and a Kenyan-based trainee or physician taking the test. So one of the major differences is that our medical curriculum, at least how it was 10 years ago, does not train you to take this USMLE. So a lot of what's testable on the USMLE is contrary to what you're testable in Kenya. So finding those differences and knowing what these differences are early in your training can make the whole process easier. And then finding the right resources and putting enough savings or money to be able to, stay the while. So definitely we'll do the webinar, and we can talk more in details through emails or LinkedIn or through the website, actually.
I'm just going to chime in quickly and say certainly more speaks to like how we should eventually get to the point where these discussions are starting very early, and each major med school in Kenya has a team of people who support students from the first year, thinking about as you're studying your first 2 years of your general sciences, how if you want to take the SMLE, what are some questions that you would be answering. So hopefully as we grow, we can really work with core groups in each of the med schools to expose people to the materials, the type of questions, so you're seeing them from the first year of med school. And when you're studying that biochem, like how would this be asked in that USMLE, so that 4 years later when you're starting to prepare, it's not the first time you're seeing those kinds of questions. Because that's the advantage that Americans have, is that they're used to testing in that way, in ways that the Kenyan system just does not.
Thank you so much, Shamtai. I can't echo what's been said enough. Each individual person is going to have a unique experience. There is a cloud of information, not just within the 6 of us, but out and about. So this is also why we have the discussion forum. There's 3 different topics: USMLE step 1, step 2, step 3. Go on there, chat with people, add your comments. Like we've talked about, we'll have a webinar, but I can't emphasize enough. The same questions you have, as we can see, probably hundreds of, if not thousands of people have. So let's communicate and share our knowledge with each other. This is for us, by us. So please do share on there. Ben, if you're on, do you want to comment briefly on Grace's experience? I see EMKF. I'm not sure if that's you or not.
Hi, it's been great having Grace coming over. It's been a bit of a transition because also from the medical board, you still have to go through the licensing, and our medical board requires you to apply, go through a peer review, and initially emergency medicine was not on their list, so it took some time for that to get on. And then the peer review process, actually what's really helped Grace in the transitioning back was because of her frequent visits back home and working on multiple projects. Then this was factored in her peer review, which made her automatically get licensed. Someone else would try the same process because they were only freshly walking back into, so Grace got licensed automatically into being a specialist, but someone else was trying to do it because they had not been coming home and doing any projects locally, were registered as a medical officer initially, and giving them they're giving them a chance to then work locally and then down the line apply for specialist recognition. So, so a lot of it, the board does consider how much work you've been doing locally for you to qualify as a specialist. So anyone looking to transition back, so spending some time locally is a good idea.
Perfect. Thanks, Ben, from your end. Grace is just back on. So Grace, you want to add to that just 30 seconds briefly?
Hi, sorry for missing out, but what you were discussing the process of getting registered or licensed back home?
Yeah, just briefly, and we can have a separate session on this. But yeah, someone asked a question about transitioning back to work clinic.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so it is something that took much longer than I anticipated, and like as Ben said, it was very helpful for me to have been there, to have been on the ground, because what I had to do once I got everything ready was that I had to sit in front of the board, of the medical board, to, you know, kind of explain to them, why is it that I want to come back to Kenya? Why is it that I think that I would be able to work in a different setting? Because, you know, all my training was in the US. So you have to be able to say, and there are, you know, severe, you know, like there are significant differences between the two places. So for you to be able to prove that you know how to work in that setting was very important. And so I am very happy to discuss with this, to have a separate discussion of the process and what I went through. And hopefully if someone else is trying to go through the same thing, we can make it a less painful process.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Han. Really did a lot of work, but is doing it, so it's possible. I think we're going to close in the interest of time on the last really great question from Allerton Odiambo. Sorry if I mispronounced your first name. And he said, KEDU being an organization with a laid down vision, could it be possible we have a good national leadership organization in Kenya, whereby the medical students in Kenya and professionals are involved and can plan for capacity building across medical schools in Kenya? Thankfully, there's an extremely active and highly reputable organization in Kenya who we've already spoken with called MSAKE. And there's also an extremely active and highly reputable organization for medical professionals called KMA, and there are others. And we've spoken with both. I want to emphasize, I want them to just wave, so just prepare, guys, just wave for like in a moment. But I just want to emphasize that our goal is not to replace what is already in place in Kenya, right? And the infrastructure, but to complement and support in whatever way that we can, and fill in gaps as we can. So, you know, great question, Allerton. And so I'd just love, if Nick, if you're on, I'd just love you to just say hello. Some of your stuff is already on our website. We're getting KMA's, you know, some of their content on our website as well. But Nick, if you're on, do you want to just briefly say hi and maybe how people can get a hold of you?
From medical students in Kenya, and we are happy to have partnered with Kenyan Doctors USA, and we had a very successful meeting indeed, where we outlined our goals and where we want to go along with this collaboration. It was really great, and I really appreciate that KEDU came on board to support us in our projects and in our activities.
And how can people get a hold of you guys, or what's the best way to link up?
So MSAKE has been there for quite a while, for around 12 years right now. And every medical student across the country actually knows about the organization. They have been very active and involving all medical students. And I think our contacts are available everywhere. And we also shared them with KEDU so that they can be put up on the website. So I think it's very easy for anyone across the world to link up with us. Yeah.
That's perfect, Nick. Thank you so much. And they will have their own session as well as KMA. KMA, again, super active organization, doing a lot of great stuff, advocacy and otherwise, some of you might know. We'll also be having a session with them because we want to make sure that US-based people know very well what they're working on and ways that they can collaborate with them. I'll turn back over to you, Yvonne.
Thank you, guys. First of all, I'm just really happy because we completed our first webinar, and it's been such an engaging session, truly. I think that there's so many great questions, and I think that we haven't really tackled even a quarter of it on this webinar, but that's why we have our website. And I just want you to know that our heart is to connect with you and meet you where your needs are, and figure out how to partner people with mentors. That was a question on that. So what I'd like for everyone to do, first of all, so this will be posted on the website. This webinar will be posted on the website for people to direct, so that we can direct people who are not present to continue to engage. And along with that, there'll be a discussion forum where you can post additional questions. Also make sure that you're registered. Then that way you can tell us what it is that you need from KEDU in terms of mentorship. And I think there's some questions that can only be addressed really on a case-by-case basis with in a mentor-mentee kind of environment. And we want to set people up with mentors as well, and create those environments for people. So continue to engage with us is what I encourage all of you guys to do. Coming up next month, the next webinar will be on COVID-19 crisis, and just kind of answering some of your questions as well. So there'll also be a space for you guys to be able to post your questions ahead of time that you have. I think that the kinds of questions that maybe the general public might ask versus the kinds of questions that physicians might ask may be different as well too. So it'll be interesting to see what kind of dialogue we can create cross-continentally. But other than that, thank you guys again. Thank you for being here. Thank you for gracing us with your time. And until next time, we look forward to continuing engagement on the website. Goodbye, guys. And again, the website is kedusa.org. KEDUSA.org. And we look forward to connecting with you. You guys have a good one and have a good week. Or weekend, rather. Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.